this show is capturing something special. It's almost like they're reeling us back in with a tractor beam and saying, remember this? Remember feeling this way as a kid, pretending you were in a spaceship, shooting down other spaceships? Remember that you love Star Wars.
Krypton to Alderaan. Krypton to Alderaan. Krypton to Alderaan. Krypton to Alderaan.
Welcome, everyone, to Krypton to Alderaan. I'm Joey, your Star Wars lover, and with me is Roish Goodlooks, your Star Wars show numbers guy.
Hello, Joey. Hello, podcast.
Hello, and we're the podcast that analyzes nerdy pop culture, but it's mostly Star Wars, and today we are talking about episode 3 of Skeleton Crew. Very interesting as an astrogration problem.
Say that 3 times fast.
I will not. You can cut me saying it 3 times fast. We'll work that out in post. But first, hey, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, if you're sticking around here listening to our takes on this show, because we will be continuing with whatever comes next, Andor's next, whatever else happens down the pike. So stick around, hit subscribe. That's enough of that. Let's punch it.
I don't know if it's healthy to yell every time, but that really hit the spot last episode.
Yeah. We might just have to make that the intro from now on for every show that comes out.
I agree.
So, episode 3. We're almost halfway through the series. Isn't that fun? Yeah. There's 8 episodes in this show because that's, for some reason, the way TV is made nowadays. So that's my bit about numbers. Do you have a bit about numbers? How's that for a transition?
Smooth. I thought we had a decent runtime this week. We got a 40-minute episode, which so far that's the average runtime for this season is 40 minutes per episode so far. And that's okay. I still think they're a little short. They cut off right when they're getting good. Like this episode, when the X-Wing showed up and they finally got in the ship, that was 3 minutes before the credits rolled. So we got 3 minutes of classic Star Wars pew-pews. That scene was basically the opposite of leaving the Death Star escape in A New Hope. Instead of rescuing a good guy and fighting the TIE fighters, they rescue a bad guy and then fight off the X-Wings. That's how I saw that. But it was only 3 minutes. I wonder how long the Death Star escape is, because that, I don't know if that feels longer to me or not. Anyway, episodes are still kind of short, but we did get the 3rd episode bounce where now we're kind of trending back up, and maybe the episodes will get longer over the next 5 towards the end of the season, because that's usually the case.
Yeah. It felt like a solid place to end the episode, though. Like, would you rather it end on something good or start on something good? To me, it's all good. Wherever you can move that line.
Well, I don't want more runtime just for the sake of more runtime, but I can pick up on this because I think they opened the episode with the parents. And I was wondering, like, oh, are we going to get an episode like all about the parents, like see a different viewpoint,
so too.
Right? Then we jump back to the kids. When the kids escaped from the Pirate Cove, I was like, okay, they're going to go to hyperspace. We'll pan back to the parents. We didn't do that. And then maybe even at the end when they escaped from the moon, I was like, okay, maybe we'll circle back to the parents. We'll round off the episode to see where they're leaving off. But we didn't really explore that B plot. I don't know. That's been interesting to me so far, that we've kind of sprinkled in what the parents are doing, but we haven't gone too in detail. If there was anything more in this episode, I wanted to hear more about Jod's backstory. I love that the kids were like starting to press on him. The moment where he breaks down and he's like, I'm just like you. I'm lost. I'm alone. I was like, oh, we're getting to some interesting character building here. And then we cut away for the pew-pews, which was fun. So I'm sure there's more of that Jod character building coming on. And we had a lot of that in this episode as well. Yeah, no B-plot stuff yet.
Maybe we'll end up spending an episode with the parents because these shows love to do that. But I was thinking more like maybe each episode will start from the parents' point of view. A few minutes of them trying to figure stuff out, and then the rest of the episode's about the kids trying to figure stuff out because the show is about the kids. I think that might be an interesting way to frame it, a format thing that we haven't really seen in any of these shows before, where, like you're saying, they usually just take an episode to go somewhere else entirely, which, as we've talked about before, can be a little bit jarring when you're really into the plot that was going on, especially with such a short season. So let's do a vibe check for episode 3. What did you think overall?
Dude, I'm still loving the ride. There's still lots of smiles And I know where you want to go with this, because one of my favorite scenes was when they start fighting the X-Wings and Jod's having them get into the way they got into their little gunnery stations was a little new for Star Wars, but like totally worked and totally called back to the originals. That was probably one of my favorite scenes from this. Having an astronomer in Star Wars, how have we never met another astronomer in Star Wars? Like maybe we have. There's obviously a lot of like astrological things that come up every now and then, like in Ahsoka, you know, they're lining up the star maps or whatever. But to say like this person is an astronomer, they literally have paper maps of the galaxy. I thought that was a cool addition to the Star Wars canon.
Yeah, very cool. And very cool character. I mean, we're seeing so many aliens in this show, which is a huge, huge green check for me, because it's been a very long time since we've seen so many aliens in Star Wars, especially in the foreground. I thought that character, Kim, was a really cool design, a really cool character. Yeah, the whole observatory thing that she's got going on with all the maps. She's like the mad professor or something that we see in maybe a lot more of these like pulpy shows or pulpy old sci-fi things, or seems straight out of something like Indiana Jones. One old professor running around looking through all their maps and stuff to find the secret treasure that they're looking for. That was another thing about this episode, is when they get to that moon or planet or whatever it is that Kim lives on, the music got really like, what I picked up, my mind went to is like old pulpy sci-fi with the synthesizer and like the theremin, which is like stuff, like very new sounds for Star Wars music. But it was very like Flash Gordon and that kind of stuff.
Great catch with the theremin there. Yeah, that stuck out a little bit. I didn't hate it, but yeah, you're right. Like they were probably going for a vibe there and maybe paying homage to something else. I wouldn't say it felt within my personal Star Wars box, but I'm all for it expanding. If we go back to that moon, I better hear that theremin again, because that's how I'm going to associate that scene. Also really interesting that moon was a moon. No pun with like Obi-Wan, like that's no moon, but
right.
You get the forest moon of Endor. Like it was just, it looked like the Earth moon.
It looked like a rock in space.
Yeah, a rock in, that's a great way to put it. Which this series seems to be trying to do that. It wants to just feel normal. Like that was just an observatory on the moon that wasn't really too out there, other than the fact that it was manned by an owl.
Right. Manned by an owl is a funny turn of phrase.
Oh, but no banana, which I would have loved. Just do that on the theremin, will you, Mick?
Mick. Yeah, I didn't even notice the music that was playing during the pew pew scene, but I did really love that scene.
It's funny you're bringing up the music, because sometimes we forget to talk about that since it's such a more nuanced thing, and I'll go on an even bigger diatribe than anything else on the episode. But it was the kids' like main theme, or the show's main theme, I guess, and it was kind of pumped up. So yeah, I was listening for that to see what was going on. I got to hear it again, because maybe they are paying more homages to some of the other scenes.
Again, with this episode, I was just on the ride. I watched the whole thing with a smile on my face the entire time. And it's hitting a bit different for me than other Star Wars shows, especially the live action ones have. This show is capturing something special for me that we talk about, I think, a lot, or at least I try to talk about when we're discussing the animated shows. The animated shows present Star Wars, present the world and the characters as in a much more magical way, in terms of like, this is my connection to Star Wars. This is what I love to see. And seeing it, like we've been saying, seeing the galaxy through the eyes of these kids who have obviously been sheltered for their entire lives, don't even know that a war just happened. At Attin must have been a secret for a super long time, as we know from Kim with the like Jewel of the Old Republic stuff, but like no one even knows that there was a war going on. Not only seeing the galaxy through the eyes of the kids, but feeling the emotions that they're feeling. I feel very emotionally connected to the kids in a very different way than I do usually the live action stuff. It's hitting for me that Wim is a fan of Star Wars. And we got that so much in this episode. We've gotten that in the previous episode. He's got his little light bright. He's like Wikipediaing Jedi temples like I do. They're living a Star Wars fantasy that I can certainly connect to. I want to go out in this galaxy. I want to imagine myself would you be a Jedi or a Sith? What color lightsaber would you have? You know, all that stuff. comes to a head of injecting ourselves into that world. And these kids are living that dream. And that is how I'm connecting to this show. I love the lore. I love learning about At Attin. I love learning about Jod. But connecting with these kids, the emotional storytelling, but also seeing how they're interacting with the galaxy is something that I did not expect to connect with me so much. Like, they know nothing. It would be like if we were thrown into the galaxy. So in conclusion, I loved this episode. This show at episode 3 is hitting for me the same way the animated shows hit for me, which we've talked a lot about. The animated shows just like being on a different level, a whole different level for us than the live action shows.
Yeah. I don't see the Omega in this show yet. Like, what I love about Bad Batch is Omega has the kind of Luke Skywalker, like, I am all of the hope in the galaxy. You know, it rests on my shoulders. Like, I'll go out there with a laser sword and do it all myself. Wim sort of has that, but Wim he says, no more pretend, but it's kind of all pretend for him. Like, it blew my mind when he got in the turret. It's funny that he was stoked to do it. And he was like, yeah, I've been training for this all my life or whatever, playing with his figurine sort of thing. But
yeah,
first of all, he starts spinning around and shooting everywhere, which was hilarious.
Yeah.
Because we all would do the same thing. But then I was like,
exactly,
dude, he's shooting at the X-Wings though.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is wild. And that's kind of where I want to see the kid's journey go. Like with the Acolyte exploring kind of the gray notion of the Jedi and the Sith. And you're like, what is good and what is evil? What's right and what's wrong? And, you know, what is truth? And this show is maybe a little more simple than that on the surface. But I thought that was pretty insane that Jod's like, get in there, shoot at the X-Wings. I think he says, like, just keep them off our tail or whatever. He's not like, blow them out of the sky.
He specifically says, just keep them back. I think that was him telling them, like, don't actually shoot them.
Right. But then Wim says, like, oh, I got him. And I was like, oh no, is he going to blow it up? And like, what's that going to be like? Now the X-Wings are actually looking for Wim because Wim is a killer now or whatever. That is a line I don't know if the show is eventually going to cross, but that's where my mind was going with it because Jod is now the father figure to Wim. But I love that the kids are pushing back. Like, the kids are in control. They're like, you're not coming on the ship until you tell us what's going on. You work for us. Even though once he does get on the ship, he's the only one that knows where all the buttons are. He puts Fern into the turret and he's like, come on, Captain. Like, don't you know? He's kind of teasing them a little bit on how much they don't know. But the kids do have this endless confidence. Yeah, it is really interesting to go on the journey with them that they don't know. But I really love that Jod admits that he's like, I'm just like you. I'm alone. I don't have it figured out. There's something beautiful there that I want them to continue to explore. And especially with Wim looking up to Jod, thinking that must be the end all be all. You're the Jedi, you save the galaxy. But like, Wim, you're shooting at the X-Wings.
Jod tells the kids that the X-Wing pilots are Kim's goons. They think that those guys are out to get them. So they just don't know that they are shooting at the good guys. What I'm seeing this show tiptoe around are these moments, these very serious moments. The seriousness is almost removed a little bit because of the kids, and it's funny and it's cheesy. 1 minute they're having a serious conversation about who's in control of the ship and who's the captain, and they should leave Jod there, and we can't even trust this guy. Who is he? And the next minute Jod comes back and he says, time to get some sleep. And then Fern says, but I'm not even tired. And then it cuts to her. Like, it's very like, oh, they're kids. We need to like step back and remember that they're kids. And so the show for me is doing just kind of a mind-blowing job of saying these stakes are still high, but we are on this kid's adventure and we need to remember that we're seeing it through the eyes of the kids.
Yeah, the kids are surprising. I also really love the scene with Neel where he's like, they think At Attin is a treasure. Like, maybe it has something to do with the great work. What did you say your parents did? And they start to like, they're doing what we're doing on the podcast. They're trying to unravel the mystery. And maybe it's a misdirection, maybe not, but like they seemingly crack it right there where Wim's like, they do something boring with money. And you're like, oh yeah, pirates, treasure. Your planet is clearly like the intergalactic bank of the old republic or something of that nature.
Right.
And I was kind of surprised that like, I don't really care about that plot line, about this treasure plot line at all. I want to know, like, the kids learning about the galaxy is interesting and Jod being not the greatest influence, but they are pushing ahead with the At Attin mystery. And the kids there just eating like the bowl of soup or whatever they were doing, like kind of cracked the code almost.
Yeah, no, that was great. Truly wonderful. The mind of a child is they're not bogged down by anything else. They're just like, here's a potential problem or here's the question. And wait, what do our parents do? This is probably the solution. First of all, Neel is super smart. We know that from the previous 2 episodes. But it's just incredible that they sit down and they're like, we cracked the code. This episode was also full of moments like that where this episode or the previous episode has asked a question that we thought might be a serious or long-term question. And then this episode answered them immediately. And I think that's to say, this isn't what this show is about. This show is about this adventure with the kids and maybe the treasure planet. But last episode, we were speculating, or I was speculating, like, I'm pretty sure Silvo is Jod and Jod is Silvo. And we could have done that up until the end with like bait and switch and all kinds of stuff. At the beginning of this episode, we learn that he's definitely Silvo. They just do away. They're just like, no, this is who he is. That mystery is not what this show is about, right? They kept us guessing for 2 episodes, and then they were like, no. And now we're unraveling the mystery behind this other thing more quickly. So I think it's really fun that it's also doing that. It's like dangling these mysteries in front of us and then being like, just kidding.
I'm going to eat my own words here because I said last week, like, Star Wars doesn't do mysteries really that great. And this is probably the best way to do it, is to just keep it simple and a little bit more quick paced rather than like trying to reveal a grand mystery at the end of the season. Because they also have these coordinates. So like you said, like, we don't know where the next episode is going to pick up. But like, are those the coordinates to At Attin? That would be pretty crazy if we're like now ready to go back there and the pirates show up there. If that's the case, like, we could wildly speculate. But yeah, you're right. I didn't realize that, but they maybe not tying a bow on all these mysteries, but they are kind of peddling them forward without it bogging down just the story of the kids and Jod finding out about the universe and growing through that.
Yeah. In live action, we see the plot of The Mandalorian start as a found family thing. And then I think it really turned into something else in season 3. But this has the potential to be a great found family storytelling, especially if they're just like, who's Jod? Well, this is who Jod is. What's going on with At Attin? Well, we're about to find that out. And it just becomes more about the character development and the found family stuff and the kids' storytelling, which I said I'm very connected to. But we got little glimpses, like, we as the audience are not supposed to trust Jod. At least we know that. We know he was the pirate in the beginning of the show. We know that he's lying about being a Jedi. I'm curious as to whether he actually can use the Force or what. But there are moments in this episode where he is soft and vulnerable and not just a bad guy pirate that might double cross them. I think he probably will, because that's how these characters learn lessons. But it's not all that. He is the Long John Silver. He cares about the kids. Like when Fern says, but I'm not even tired, and then the next scene cuts to her sleeping, like Jod walks in the room and has a very sweet moment where he just looks at them and kind of smiles. And then he talks to KB about him lying about being a Jedi. So there are really soft moments with him that I'm really enjoying seeing, that make the draw to seeing his character development more of a draw for me. Because it's not just like he's a pirate, he's a bad guy, black and white. It's that the potential for him to develop a strong connection to these kids was what I would really love to see going forward.
I need to see a scene where Wim is like, can you teach me to do that? Whether or not Jod is a Jedi, I need to see him like fake Jedi train Wim for a moment. I hope that's coming. I love that when Ventress shows up in Bad Batch and starts giving Omega some Force training. You know, I don't know if you call it Jedi training or not, but they do that training. I want to see some of that.
Yeah, I want to see Jod be a combination of Ventress in that era Ventress and Crosshair. That to me is what we're setting up Jod to be.
Yeah, it's so interesting because he's not a Sith. He's not a Jedi. Maybe has a Force, maybe he doesn't. But if he does have the Force, he's a very new kind of Force user for Star Wars. And it's blowing my mind in that.
He's a Maz Kanata, where in the High Republic books, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, Maz Kanata is Force sensitive, but she becomes a pirate, right? And she has friends who are also Force sensitive pirates. It is like a third type of thing that we haven't seen in any of these shows. You're right. Which is just another super intriguing part of this. Like it's a question that I asked all throughout the Bad Batch. Are these altered clones force sensitive? Is Omega force sensitive? We're getting these characters that are not Jedi or Sith be force sensitive.
See, that's how we can tie this together. Where if Jod's like, I'm not a Jedi, but he already told him, he's got all these great like Zen one-liners. The force flows through all of us. So he's heard that from somewhere. That if Wim knows, like, Jod's not a Jedi, but can you teach me how to do that? Like, I don't have to be a Jedi to tap into it. Because you could see Wim, he's got the endless optimism, but I don't think he believes he's a Jedi. But if someone was to tell him, much like every other Jedi's journey, like, you just got to tap into it, kid, maybe he could do it. And it'd be interesting to have that lesson from a pirate.
Yeah. Oh, so many roads to go down, so much potential. I think overall, I'm just happy that I'm happy and relieved that we are enjoying the show this much. I think that what they're doing with this show, being from the kids' perspective, drawing us back into like what Star Wars looks like through kids, is very purposeful. It's almost like they're reeling us back in. It feels like they're bringing us all back in with the tractor beam and saying, remember that you love Star Wars, please. Like, remember this? Remember feeling this way as a kid? Remember sitting with your iPad or computer looking up Jedi temples? Remember pretending you were in a spaceship shooting down other spaceships? Remember doing all of this? Remember that you love this world? Remember that you love Star Wars? That's what it feels. It feels very purposeful to me. Kudos to them for having the self-awareness, I guess, to do that. Because from what we've seen recently, there's a lot of discourse in Star Wars. Obviously, I guess there always is. It would be nice for this to act as a little bit of a reset button on that, to remind people why they fell in love with Star Wars in the first place.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a breath of fresh air, and it's a whole lot of fun. But all right, let's keep this conversation going. Listeners, we would love to hear what you're connecting with in Skeleton Crew so far. Are you punching in the coordinates with KB? Are you up in the turrets with Fern and Wim? Or are you studying for the career assessment test with Neel? Or are you just robbing people with Jod? There's so much here that they've thrown at us. I love it. Listeners, we would love to hear from you. Leave your comments and make sure to subscribe and tune in for more nerdy pop culture, but mostly Star Wars. Thanks for listening to the show today. I've been Royce.
I've been Crimson Joe.
And we've been
Krypton to some rock in space.